Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. First off, I'd like to recognize the organizations and partnerships, American Planning Association, Orlando Metro Section, OMS. We also have the State APA Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, and we also have representation from the American Institute of Architects, Orlando. Today, again, we would like to have this opportunity to have an open discussion about dialogue, and I think most often to have the opportunity for Black professionals to talk about their experiences and to touch upon how to engage and ways to engage, challenges for engagement. So what we like to take the opportunity to do at this point in time is to go around to have our panelists talk about their positions in their careers. For me, my name is Brenda Ryan. I have about 20 years of public government experience. About half of those 20 years were spent out in the field, doing landscaping, wetland assessments, recreation, those types of aspects. I started having an interest in planning with my field experience and wanting to have a better understanding of the planning aspects of it before development started. So I went into planning and pretty much developed into right now today as a planning manager in all aspects of planning, long range and current planning too as well. So I'm grateful and appreciative to be part of this panel discussion. So we'll go ahead and to hand it off to Gisela and Dan for their introductions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gisela Augustine, aka Gigi the Planner, as a lot of people know me by. I am a planner here in South Florida. I work for the city of Pompano Beach. I've been there for about almost 8 years now. I am also the founder and CEO of my own business, Gigi the Planner LLC, where I am an advocate for planning, specifically in the Black community, and making sure that we expose people outside of the planning field to the planning field. And I have a large platform on social media where I help to bring forth a planning message. In addition to that, I provide career coaching and planner products and those things of that nature. Also, I am the chair of the Planning and Zoning Board in my local community, and I also serve as the chair-elect for Planning the Black Community Division of APA. So, welcome everyone.
Thank you, sir.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Kirby. I'm an architect and a planner. I'm in the People in Places Solutions group of Jacobs. Jacobs being one of the largest professional and technical services companies on the globe, and we work in a myriad of areas, everywhere from traditional A&E practice, but really across the range to being a solutions provider with regard to sustainability and technology, and really taking on the world's biggest problems. You'll see Jacobs people in a lot of different, working in a lot of different arenas. You know, smart cities, you name it. We probably have somebody there. Rocket launches out at NASA, the entire gamut of things. My interest in planning goes back to being an undergraduate student in architecture, and really thinking that I needed to understand things that went on envelope in those implications of policy decisions. So that's kind of, I got the bug. I was a dual degree student in graduate school. So I went for architecture and for urban planning and in the urban design program. And since I came out, have practiced both in the public sector and private sector projects, tending towards larger projects typically, but it's been lately, of course, very much involved in issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Unfortunately for our company, we didn't start this dialogue when things happened in 2020 with the killings of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. That was an ongoing discussion, and we advanced it even further. And I'll share some more about you as we move forward in the conversation. But I am the co-chair of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force for AI Orlando, and also am sitting on the APA Florida task force as well.
Thank you, Dan. And just a couple of housekeeping items before. If you join in with the chat, we have a couple of resources that are available as we're speaking to AIA and both APA resources on policy guides for both organizations. And if you have, there's be an opportunity where if we have a Q&A session at the end. I also forgot to mention as far as with my role with the APA, so currently right now, I am part of the Orlando Metro section as the Osceola County Director. I've sat in on some of the scholarship subcommittees and a variety of other different activities. Now, with that being involved here, again, the topic that we wanted to go through is the challenges to engaging in inclusive dialogue. So we'd like to go around to I guess to figure out what different types of aspects can make dialogue really engaging, really meaningful, and inclusive, and what aspects or what things that poses a challenge to making this dialogue for inclusion and to make it meaningful. I think that's pretty much what we'd like the opportunity to discuss. I will go ahead and to start off, I think for me, there's two aspects to challenges to that. One of them, to me, what I feel in my experience is there's a lack of support. There's a lack of a network for Black professionals. I think in some cases where you may have within your local jurisdictions or in the private sector with your company, there are not any type of opportunities to foster or to support you as a Black professional. In some ways that there is a focus on the planning profession, but not, there's a less of an emphasis as far as with nurturing you as a Black professional. I find in some cases where that there is a, with the identity where it fades to some degree, and you have a sense of, there's a sense of alienation. And there's some missing element where you continue to progress in your career, but you find there's a missing element that's there because you're not engaged and you're not fully, there's something that's missing that's there, and there's a disconnect. I think for me, that's the challenge in my experience of the lack of that network, lack of support in that sense. The other one would be as far as with non-minorities and the white privilege, and finding ways to have these uncomfortable conversations with your colleagues. Without triggering any type of defensiveness or trying to have those types of discussions, or in trying to have this dialogue of being more inclusive. I think those are the interests for me with this panel and what we're trying to do today. I don't know, I'll take it over to Dan and to Gisela to see whether or not if there are other challenges or things that you would like to also to discuss today and to frame the conversation today.
Thanks so much. Go ahead, Gisela.
Sorry. So I do want to speak a little bit about microaggressions and a lot of the things that happen in the work space as it relates to that. Mainly, you know, with me specifically being a Black female and being really young, and me dealing with those three aspects about who I am in the workspace has been challenging over the past few years. And it's like I can't really overcome those things because, you know, that's who I am. So I think it's really important that people that are, you know, non-minorities are very cognizant of, you know, the things that they say to their coworkers of color as it relates to, you know, like small things that it may seem like a little joking, but at the end of the day, it can, you know, pierce that person's heart a little bit, especially when we're, as people of color, trying to make a name of ourselves in our professions, it's very discouraging when we're not taken seriously based on certain aspects about our identity. So I think it's very important that we have that discussion about microaggressions and how that affects us in our everyday lives.
You know, there's so many different ways to unpack this, and I want to start with something that Brenda said in terms of dialogue. And then we can kind of probably move to talking about individuals and how you might be an ally if you're not a Black planner and you want to be an ally for Black planners. We kind of talk about what makes sense there and ways to approach it. Then we can also talk about organizational perspectives and how organizations approach it. But I want to start with that idea of dialogue, because in many of you have probably been through this. I know all of us on the panel have been through it because we talked about it before. You know, we've been asked to engage in a lot of these different types of discussions, and it can be exhausting because sometimes it's, oh, well, you know, let's go get that Black planner and let's talk to them and have them represent all the other Black planners, and let's talk about that. Now, fortunately for me today, I work in a very diverse organization, so we've been able to have those conversations with a lot of different people and a lot of different voices. But as I've talked to other organizations and other Black planners, you know, I've gotten that, right. You know, there's the weight of now you've got to represent, and these are all critically important issues. So we want to have these dialogues, but you know, it can really be exhausting, and it's not necessarily the only thing that we're all dealing with, right? Given what we've seen happen in 2020. But first of all, in approaching a dialogue, so we had, and I think it's numbering in the hundreds, possibly thousands at this point in our organization, what do we call critical conversations? And they were just that. They were an opportunity for people to open up about how they felt, and really to just get things on the table and fleshed out, to just in a safe place so that we could process what was going on together. You know, it really starts with this idea of respect for someone's humanity, and that in a very, you know, it starts there, right? And being able to actively listen. You know, when you listen to other people, are you trying to understand what they're saying, or are you just trying to counter their argument? You know, are you trying to affirm where they're coming from, or are you just trying to find a weakness to exploit? And start the dialogue from a place of sincerity and honesty, but you cannot stop there, right? There is a need, if you're going to do work on diversity and inclusion, to build a level of cultural competence, personally, and understanding of history. You know, what have we gone through, in this country? Just looking at that, where we are as a people. I mean, we could start to unpack, some of those things. And I heard a quote from the journalist Charles Blow, and his quote was, "This is a Groundhog Day for racial oppression." You know, it's not new, and it's come back, over and over again. So I think that those are some things to start to unpack. And again, we can talk about how you deal with it individually, how you deal with it on the organizational level as well.
Yeah. With the identity, again, I think for me, it had to deal with countering being token, being the only, in the early stages, being the only Black planner, and trying to switch that around to a positive, to where I'm a trailblazer, knowing full well that there's not any other immediate professionals, Black professionals within the organization, or because of just what you're doing, you're just trying to be a better planner with time and life and everything else. not even having the opportunity to even connect to maybe planners within the region. So for me, there's a variety of different ways of how I had to counter the negative about being the only Black planner, being the only, Black inspector. And that in itself was where, I'm out of the office and I'm in the field and I show up on a construction site, or I show up there, they're talking to me on the phone, and you should have mentioned those microaggressions where there's these nonverbal kind of cues of being surprised, of, being a Black individual, on the phone speaking with me, very pleasant, but then having to, to meet with me in person. It's, going through that experience.
Hey,
So
Brenda, I'd love to ask you a question about that. So
yeah,
was that driven by more by the locale where you were, or more by the organization, or some combination? Where do you think most of that negativity was coming from?
I think it was a combination in my case. So in my inspection career, or my point, it was, two different organizations. So I want to, caveat that it's several different organizations. The first one, it was organizational because I think I was young. This was when I was, young, out of college, and Gisela can probably even talk about more about the frustrations of being a young professional. And they're not going to assign you, being an inspector out in the field, they're not going to assign you to the the nice urban types of settings and those types of things. For me, it was in a very rural area. It was these types of places that frankly no one wanted to do and wanted to even to deal with. It was not, the, management at the time being fully aware of that and not providing the proper types of advice for me, not providing any type of, communication about, what to expect, or even to have some type of, caution out there.
And you
And
got thrown in the deep end of the pool
pretty
and were
much.
expected to swim.
Pretty much, and even the vehicle. I mean, I got the oldest, vehicle that there is. Equipment not working. Those types of aspects in the early part of my inspection aspects of my career. The other one was definitely location, because here I actually was raised here in Central Florida, and at the time this was definitely again a rural type of setting too as well, where there was vast amounts of undeveloped properties, and you have residents, those individuals are very strong about that, and not having development whatsoever and preserving what was there, those aspects. So it was a combination of the actual location of these rural locations that were being pressured with development. And
So
as we know, as planners and dealing with, with these types of development and the type of um, types of, confrontation and type of objections to that in general, coupled by, again, they were very vicious in some cases where, unfortunately, I was in a marked vehicle, and by the time I had got back, now this was before cell phones. I don't want to, with my age, but this was before we had cell phones. This was walkie-talkie, and in a rural area, the services are kind of spotty. And by the time I got back to the point where there was the sheriff was called out because there was the belief that that vehicle was stolen, and not putting together where I was an employee of that organization, but the fact that I was out there doing what I need to do, they thought that it was stolen. So it was, again, a combination of the organization and providing that support, again, having these conversations of being flat out honest about, would you truly send an employee out in this area without the proper tools, but and understanding the location, and understanding as a Black employee, and having those conversations, however uncomfortable that they are, to make sure that I was protected, to make sure that I had proper tools, to make sure that I had proper safety protocols in place should something should have happened to me out in the field.
Was there ever a conversation, a kind of debrief around those issues, or it was just kind of expected that you would deal with it, internally and individually?
No, there was no conversation because, again, my identity as a Black female wasn't even the case. It was just as a female, an employee. So it was the fact that this was an inspection. The inspection had to be done. And if there was any issues, with that, then that was it. There was no type of conversation about, again, my identity as a Black employee to that degree. As a matter of fact, with that particular situation, I actually was written up for it because at some point in time, I did not feel safe. I did not feel safe at all. And I could not complete the inspection completely. And I got, sent into the office to discuss about not completing the assignment or not completing the inspection on top of that. And when the call came back about, again, sort of in a way of causing the situation, because it was a fiasco with the sheriff too as well, and going through, having the sheriff and having this phone call, about this vehicle that was suspected to be stolen. No conversation whatsoever. So no conversation whatsoever about, again, the uniqueness or even identifying or acknowledging me as a Black employee or as a Black individual.
Well, it's such a relatable thing because and I think to everyone, because what that involved is you weren't seen.
Right.
You were not set up for success because you weren't seen. It's so much of what we need to do as individuals and as organizations is acknowledge people for who they are and what they bring to the table, right? So and I'll relay, the experience we've had as a company to say one of our values is we live inclusion, and it was that way before 2020, right? But if we're going to actually and carry that out every day, we do need to embrace all these different perspectives. We created this thing, we call it our Together Beyond strategy, and it really goes to 4 areas. One, we're really going to make an effort to develop our talent, right? And that means that we're going to attract and retain the best talent, and that we're looking for those and we're looking for opportunities. So that's one, developing the talent. 2, that we're going to have this commitment and accountability by senior leadership, who is engaged, and and to actually, how are you, actively engaged, and what have you done, and what have you done to support your employees. And then third thing is it's culture and building those opportunities for engagement. So getting people, actually involved in what we call our culture of caring, and promoting these initiatives. They're part of, when we have these moments that start our meetings, they used to just be safety moments, but then they became, okay, can you tell a story about situations of inclusion and diversity? Can you share something about your background or an experience? And that has really become a prominent feature of who we are on an ongoing basis. And then the fourth part of it is we're going to grow our business. What we know is having diverse teams working for diverse clients, there's an expectation of that, but that diverse teams develop more innovative solutions, right? It's better for business. If you just look at it from a selfish perspective, it's better for business. You're going to get better solutions. So by recognizing who people are and what contributions that they bring to the table.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to indicate, so one of the things that my office or my city does, and I think it's good, and I think it should be continued probably a little bit more, is we have this diversity training yearly for the employees. I did it a few years ago, but I think it would be important that if we, have a diversity training, that it's everybody attends it every single year. Because of course, say if you had the training 5 years ago and you only need to take it once, you need to be reminded of things that maybe you shouldn't be doing in the office space, as it relates to being involved with people of different cultures, different races, different identities. So I think it's very important that we keep that in mind. I don't hear about it often where people have diversity trainings in their offices, so I think that's important to incorporate.
Yeah. It's yes. And in my experience now with my organization, it's visual. So going from being an aspect where your identity is faded, it's washed away, and to me, with that prior experience, and then now having the experience now where there are other Black managers, there are other Black female managers, there are other Black female directors. We have also Black female executive level too as well. And it becomes really difficult from a basic level. People, again, we talk about this, but I think people don't understand, again, the visibility, just alone the visibility of you have where you see those people that are there. You can see those individuals in those. It gives you, again, that sense of hope, that sense of, again, when you're that negativity, again, that alienation, that tokenism starts to build up, then you start to see, again, for me visually, that was really what helped me throughout, again, with different organizations and just even visually seeing other people that were like me. And within their departments, they might be the only one, but knowing that there's other, females that have the same types of responsibilities and same types of challenges too as well.
Yeah, and I would say in my career, I have experienced, a portion of it where I was the only Black person in my office, and I felt very alienated, like you mentioned. And one of the things that I was looking into was, can I find a city where it's like more Black people so I could work there? I did look into that. Predominantly Black cities, like a Black city hall or whatever, where I would be around more people looking like me, because I did feel really alienated at one point. And I mean, that really started my business, honestly, because there's just not enough Black planners in the field in the first place. So with my business, I tried to go out and teach other Black kids about the planning field to help, make them aware of other types of professions and what they're normally considering when they're going into college. So I think it's really important that, we're, looking back at the younger generation, trying to encourage them to look into this field so that we can help increase the diversity of the field.
Gisela, you've been on really that's a crusade to make the profession more diverse. Could you share just kind of the ways in which maybe you've seen that work, or even the thought of growing other networks, both of current planners and future planners, and in some places that has worked?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the things also, in addition to me doing workshops and trainings for the youth, I think it's also important that we help mentor planning students, because one of the things I noticed when I was in school, there was, I wouldn't say a large number, but there was a number of Black students at school with me. However, all of them didn't go transition to the planning field. So even though we have them, some of them are breaking off. So I think it is important that we help mentor those in college, because that helps a lot as it relates to the transition. If they get too discouraged or they can't find a job fast enough, or whatever the case may be, they may not actually transition into the field. So that sort of work comes in with mentoring, where I do career coaching specifically. A lot of the people that I coach are Black. I would probably say maybe about 80%. I do have some Hispanic, Asian, white as well, but a large majority are Black people that are coming to me trying to learn just more about the field, more about how I can go get a planning job. I think that's really important because sometimes there's a disconnect between college and the workforce, and a lot of people are dropping off. We have all these people out here with planning degrees, however, they're not actually working the planning field, and we don't even know who they are. So I think that is one of the ways where it works, where helping mentoring the students in the planning schools to help transition them into the field.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Brenda talked about some barriers that are there in making that transition, and you took it upon yourself to start your own practice in order to get over that. Some other people may choose to walk away. What if so? Is there advice that you could give? And maybe this is a great question for Brenda. If you're working in a majority organization and that's your job and that's where you're wanting to succeed, what are the ways that, both from a perspective of the planner working or people that want to be allies for that planner, what could they do to help be allies for them?
I think for me, in some cases, goodness, it's a lot of soul searching. I mean, I tell you that it's really difficult. For me, it was started in the late 90s. And I speak to a lot of folks back then. It was, for a lot of us, it was just nose to the ground, nose to the ground, nose to the ground. It was to the point where, only, your presence mattered. And that was pretty much it. You're breaking the barrier because of just your presence alone being there. And it's a lot of internal struggle, again, being and having that weight of responsibility of knowing, again, yes, I'm breaking the barriers. Yes, I'm breaking the boundaries just being here. But is that enough? I mean, what does that going to mean if I'm the only one here and nobody else really knows fully, or you're not able to even discuss it or to talk about it? It's a lot of soul searching, because at some point in time, unfortunately, a lot of folks have to make that decision to, either to leave the organization or to pursue something else. It is definitely about getting more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think for a lot of folks it's scary. It's really scary of being in an uncomfortable situation, because in some cases you do have to rely on non-minorities. And in my case, I did have opportunities from other white people, and in providing me that cross training with planning when I was making the transition from, out in the field inspector to planning. It was white individuals that really provided me with that opportunity. And for a lot of people, that is not something that they feel comfortable or, in doing. So it's a matter of sometimes having to, again, soul search and taking that risk and utilizing, which is the second aspect that we talked about as far as with non-minorities and with a privilege, that you have to be able to be uncomfortable in some cases and to rely on resources that you may not have even considered to provide you, to some degree, that voice. Now, it may not be the same, and may not be the same as really talking with them truly about your, the struggles of identity and being Black. It may not be to that degree, but it may give you that hope where, okay, maybe I can give, urban planning, maybe I can stick with this. It may take a little bit more time. I don't want to give up on it. And that gives you that sense of hope that in some way that eventually that you can work with a company that talks openly about inclusion, that visually that you see diverse, that in some cases, Gisela, there might be a city hall where it is 90%, Black, and that we'll be able to have that opportunity in some way, shape, or form. But I think that's probably the best advice, and you have to, in some cases, be comfortable with being uncomfortable and reach out to. We talked about this a little bit about maybe allies outside of planning, allies with architecture or allies within the community in general to give you that support.
Go ahead, Gisela.
Yeah, in addition to that, I will also say I think we need to ensure that we're taking better care of our mental health. A lot of times we're not really considering that as it relates to how we're able to deal with situations. So I know in the Black community, getting therapy is taboo. But a lot recently it's been a little bit, everybody's welcoming a little bit more. So I think that is something that we all should consider, as well as having mentors, people that's been in the profession a little bit longer, and leaning on them and getting advice, and trying to gain some knowledge from them as it relates to how we can move forward and overcome some of our internal soul searching types of issues that we have to deal with.
This is so. I was in listening to that. I am. It is in some ways. I know it's true. Like everything Brenda just said about being represented and going through that and being the first this or first that, that those are all achievements to be celebrated. But we're kind of the only people, left in the U.S. that still, meaning in a significant way celebrate that idea of being first. But okay, so it's Black History Month, right? And we can celebrate some first. We've all been some sort of first. I was the first African American to be president of the American Institute of Architects in Florida in 100 years, right? So I'm very happy to have had that opportunity and for that to have been acknowledged. But I will say with a high level of certainty, I don't find just being present to be enough, right? I want to have influence, which I'm fortunate in my career to being able to earn the position to have influence. But I want to also feel within my organization the ability to be self-actualized, right? To be supported and to be able to achieve and to be able to reach out. And you've got to, and I want more people to have and experience that. And I'll go a step further. The millennials I work with and the younger folks, they're not having it, right? It's not okay for them to just be, represented and, to be there. They want all of those things too. And they rightfully should want that. And inclusivity has to go broader. And that is if there's anything I want to, get across, and even the way we talk about some of these things, right? Even looking at them through the white lens, if you will, even there's something even inherently wrong about that. That's not, it's not this culture or that culture, it's our culture. I mean, as African Americans, we own America as much as anybody. I mean, we are inherently American. All the ideals in the Constitution, those are things that we aspire to. When people talk about, hey, we built this, we built it. We built it. In a lot of cases, our ancestors built it for free, right? But we own it. We've served in the military. You had, when I look at the astonishing growth of segregation in the U.S., it was, look at post-World War II, so the injustices that were done through, whether that be through housing policies and finance and zoning laws, right? And where highways were located, and all of these injustices are one on top of the other. So we you couldn't find decent housing, and we're pushed into certain neighborhoods, and you know, it's the history, our history's full of that. And if I could just encourage planners to have one thing, is to just have an awareness of the context with which you work, that planners have been complicit, you know, just like realtors, just like elected officials, in pushing these policies that disenfranchise people, that have caused economic disadvantage, that have caused environmental disadvantage. And if we're going to live up to our, you know, AICP code of ethics, and we're going to do planning in the public interest, this idea of inclusion is not, it's not an optional thing that we can do. And I know I just opened up probably a can of worms there, but there's so much we need to unpack there. And I know we've got a opportunity for people to ask questions in the chat, and I'd love for us to get that going as well. But you know, there's so much.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. Again, the presence, and this is where, for me, this is where I realize it. My presence enough is not enough. It's just simply not enough. And in speaking of with planning and the APA too, as planners, we talk about and we review and we emphasize the different pieces, portions, parts of subdivision. You know, we look at the streets, we look at the recreation, we look at the housing and everything else. And for me, not having a conversation about me as a Black female is the same as to say, as to one of my planners, you know what, don't worry about the streets on the inside of the subdivision. Don't worry about that review and that. As long as it's there, it's in and out, it's fine. Don't worry about the recreation. Don't worry about the grass or to look at it. I'm sure there'll be, you know, some type of green or some type of grass that's in there. And don't worry about the houses. As long as they're on the lots, it's fine. So to me, I liken the same thing, that we emphasize, you know, we have to look at the details, the pieces, the portions and parts of a subdivision. But yet when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, it's for all. I think for me, and as far as with dialogue, if you start a conversation about it, should be for all, what have you, you have to acknowledge the pieces, portions, and parts that make up the whole. And I think from a planning perspective, it should be the same way as far as with dialogue about inclusion and diversity. And I'm hoping this resonates too also with, you know, planners in general, and maybe from that basic level of what you do on a day-to-day basis with the looking at these subdivisions as the pieces, portions, of parts, utilize that as far as to engage conversation about acknowledging you have to have these conversations as detailed as you review streets, houses, the same way that you have look at these details is the same way that you need to have these conversations about equality and about race.
There's a, you know, one of the things I should have gotten a graphic of it, but there's a continuum of anti-racist organizations, of moving from being a really exclusive organization all the way to being a transformed organization. And I've seen it in a few different places. I know I saw it published. There was a guide that actually the Episcopal Church put out, that it's in, you know, there's great resources in, like, the anti-racism book that's out. I'm trying to think of the name of the author right now, and it's escaping me. But the Color of Law book, it's out right now. I mean, that should be a must-read book for planners. But that goes to organizations, and it also goes to the spaces we govern, right? From being exclusive places, enclaves, if you will, to being transformed or inclusive spaces. You know, the continuum I was telling about for organizations, and I think any organization you're a part of should understand where you're at on this continuum. There's 6 stages, again, going from an exclusive organization to a transform one. So the first stage is, hey, let's, it's status quo. Like we were bringing in the people that we know that we've always worked with. This is how we do it. Nothing changes. Secondly, going to passive, well, you're in the club. You're kind of maintain some of the privileges of some of the people, but we'll have some of these other folks that are exceptional. Oh yeah, we've got, one person of color that's exceptional. We'll have them in there. The third on the continuum is being compliant, to say, okay, well, we know there's a need for affirmative action. So we're going to do the level of what we need to do. We're going to get to our percentages on participation and everything, but we're just kind of, we've got some people, we've got some compliance, and they do that. The fourth level is being anti-racist, that you've got growth and some understanding of people that are what it means to be multicultural, and there's some outlook. The fifth one is that you're starting to redefine how you make decisions and how you set forth the mission and the goals of the company around inclusion, right? And the sixth stage is transform. We're there. We're an inclusive organization. We've got people. We're holding people accountable. This is our vision. This is part of our culture, and this is who we are. So I would encourage people to look at that. I'll try to put that in the chat, a link to that information, because it's critical. If you're going to move, you've got to measure it, right? We all know that. You got to measure. You got to keep track of it.
And I think one thing that organizations should consider, and I was just on a panel, and that part of a conversation yesterday, learning about some of the history of APA, and how way back when there was a requirement where they have at least like 25% people of color on their different boards. And I think we need to come back to something like that, where we have a requirement put into the bylaws, or wherever the case may be, where we're having, a percentage, a minimum put into place, where we have a certain number of people of color on these different boards and organizations, because I think it's important that we have some diversity across the board on different levels.
So is there a difference between a quota and being inclusive?
You mean like in your heart? I guess you're saying like in your heart internally. I mean, because yeah, you can. I think that's one place to start. Now, of course, just because you have a certain number of people of color doesn't mean that the other people in the group are actually inclusive. Well, let me say this: have an inclusive mindset, I should say. Just because we have, a certain number of Blacks or a certain number of Hispanics, Asians, or whoever else on the boards, doesn't mean that everybody else really brings them in with open arms. So, of course, there are other things that need to be put into place, but I think that is one place to start as it relates to maybe having more diversity in different organizations.
I think the measures are different. They're both measurable. You have a quota, it's measurable by numbers. And then inclusiveness too, it has to be measurable. But I think the measures are a little bit different, where quotas, it could be just quantity in itself. You may have, it's as far as with different types of experiences and making sure, as far as with qualifications. So I think, but inclusiveness though, it is measurable, but in the actions, there's certain actions and there's certain things measurably, I think, that are more effective than just a quota, because quotas in some cases, again, it's just for some people, and that's what might be hesitation, because for most, it's the measure is just the quantity. And I think with an inclusion, if it's really effective, that you can have certain types of measurable goals or measurable types of actions that are also, it's very dynamic and it's ongoing too as well. So but to me, they're both measurable, but those measures are different in a way. And I think inclusion, because there's many different ways and many different aspects that you can do measurably by via action, that probably can be a bit more welcoming than if you have something that's a quota.
I think it's important that people understand the difference there, and it really gets to what's behind it and the execution, okay, and the what's behind it and how it is handled, because it's not just any person of color, any woman will do, but that we're building the pool of qualified people and that we are encouraging them to step forward. We're removing barriers that would have them step forward, whether that's could be something as simple as a statement in a position description, right? That discourages them from applying. We've all seen that, the coded language, but it's not just we want to count the numbers, but it's not just the number, right? It's got to be how it's carried out. It's got to be the quality, and the drive behind it, right? To help build the group. Do you have interns? Do you have relationships with HBCUs? Do you have relationships with or minority organizations? So that you're getting people involved. Are you helping to grow that network so that when there's opportunity, you've got folks ready to step up and to not just be present, not just be in a role, but to succeed in that role, that they're empowered and they're capable. And I think that we all want to see that, right? It's not just it's not just the numbers. It is truly being inclusive.
So as far as with time here, so we have one in the chat about listen and watch later on. And I believe this broadcast is being recorded, and I'm not sure if it'll be made available on the state APA EDI webpage, but it is being recorded so that way you can go back and to listen to it. I'm not sure if there's any other questions or that are out there for us.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any in the chat here.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to be sure to make an opportunity if there are any other questions from any of our attendees. Okay. All right. Well, I think we have about 7 minutes, and I think again, from a policy standpoint, we do have for APA the policy guide that APA has placed. For me, I have to say that I was a member of the Black Division nationally, but I actually canceled that because for me, I just was not getting a lot out of it. But what I'm seeing here, as far as with this new push with equity and diversion on a more state and local level, I think that's where it's needed. So I'm hoping this is going to be the start of, again, something that's much more meaningful and much more tangible for our profession, for our professionals, for our students too as well, that are looking into entering into the planning profession, and also seasoned professionals too as well that are in need of, again, additional guidance, additional support. Gisela, I mean, we explained it, that the mental toll too as well, and resources that we can provide.
I'd love to share a couple things that I've been involved in and that I'm aware of in terms of these efforts that I think are being successful. I'm a member of a group called NOMA, N-O-M-A. It's the National Organization of Minority Architects, primarily an organization of African American architects, but a lot of other people are welcome to join and be a part of the group and to be allies in the group. NOMA has a program called Project Pipeline to help increase the numbers in the profession. We are in the low single digits, and if you can believe it, there have been less than 500 Black women that have become licensed architects in the US ever, right? So that's kind of the thing with that network is people know their number, but that's thankfully on the upswing and expanding. I'm on the board for an organization called based in DC, that's the Architects Foundation, and we every year do a diversity advancement, well, not every year, ongoing basis, do a diversity advancement scholarship program, and we are trying to create a more support students, but also help them to build their network so that when they come out in the field, they are networked and ready and capable. And then I also want to talk about our effort at AIA Orlando, which has been a really a hyper a local effort, if you will, to look at what we can do as an organization. And we know there's so many different efforts going on. We want to look specifically at what we could do within the organization. So we really came up with 3 areas where we are trying to make a difference. One is we want to empower both current and future firm leaders with the an ability to help take their organizations along this continuum to make them more inclusive, to provide them with resources to be more inclusive, to walk alongside them as needed, but to really empower them so they have an awareness of how to address these issues within their organization. That's for the people within our the area that our chapter serves. We want to be a connector for people in allied organizations that are also doing this work. Again, I mentioned NOMA. There are a number of other groups that are actively doing this work in our industry, and we want to network with all of them. So I've been very pleased to be a part of this program today for that reason. And then the third thing, we want to have our own house in order, which means to review all of our policies to see, are we creating barriers? Are we not aware of things we're doing that are barriers to people, whether that be a barrier to serve in leadership or to do business with the organization, or some policy that we have that is creates a more exclusive environment when it should be more inclusive across our members. So that's the kind of thing I would encourage other organizations to do as well. But I just wanted to share with you what our group was doing with everyone today.
And also I wanted to put in a small plug for APA Florida EDI committee. We are a robust committee of planners of color and other minority planners. And keep a lookout on the APA Florida webpage for any additional resources that we have on that page. There are some handouts that have been attached to this webinar that you guys can look at. One of them being a list of resources of things that you could do, videos you can watch, podcasts you can listen to, articles you can read, books you can read related to anti-racism and diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes. Okay. And I just want to, on the local level for the Orlando Metro section, as far as with EDI, we're actually now identifying some of our local organizations, such as AIA Orlando, in having an ongoing type of a panel of how we can continue to coordinate our efforts, have different future panelists, different webinars on different aspects. Dan had mentioned about the color of law. I think that maybe perhaps, we can have different speakers, or even just have additional panel discussions about different aspects about law, different aspects, about mental health, those types of things. And we're hoping with this organization, with this partnership, we can start to organize a bit more this series or these different types of events, and be able to get the word out and to have a more organized type of aspect. I also want to acknowledge also the OMS Women in Planning group too as well. They're having ongoing too as well upcoming events, and And I think our effort locally, because this is where it matters really, again, coming from the state and also locally, and this is where we're trying to reach as many people as possible with these types of panel discussions. Again, I think for a lot of folks that may be a bit hesitant because of just, again, not being refined or not being, polished. I think it says a lot where you have a forum where you can have more of a freer types of discussion, and it's sponsored by the organizations, these professional organizations who are now, again, the importance of having this discussion, the importance of having these types of policies in place. And we're hoping with that, then we can reach additional people and we can have different types of panelists and different types of speakers become involved. Do we have any questions out there? Okay, I think we have a question here. I'm not sure who this is from, but it says, great job, ladies. As a non-traditional student, 20-year veteran firefighter, 45 years old, these platforms allow me the grace to embrace the uncomfortableness I tend to feel. Thank you. It's more of a thank you. We appreciate it. Okay. Do we have till, is it 3 o'clock? Or is it 2:30?
You can have as long as you like. You can have 3 o'clock if you'd like. I think I have unmuted anyone, so if anyone has a question they'd like to verbally ask, you can unmute yourself and ask that question.
Okay.
You thought we'd have people all riled up by this, by some of the topics here. I mean,
I
these
think
are,
it's just kind of marinating, I think at least kind of, marinating.
they can really be, these can be uncomfortable discussions to have. I mean, we're talking all in the family today, but I know there's certainly, we all have encountered skeptics or people that don't want to hear about this stuff. When you have something that's a panel on Black planners or diversity, the folks that tend to be attracted are people that are open to the message, so but those conversations with people that, let's say, that don't get it, they're equally important and certainly challenging, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes you have to ask, like, if you're getting offended by what somebody is saying, you really truly have to ask yourself exactly what you're getting offended about it. And I think it takes a lot of time to really truly break down, again, and truly identifying it could be, again, misinformation or not having enough information about it. And this is with my experience, again, with trying to have these discussions with non-minorities and trying to explain, white privilege and getting responses like, I don't understand it. I wasn't born. I think they latch on to the privilege part and not realizing that it's not necessarily saying that or not acknowledging that white people do not have struggles, do not have adversities. That to me, that is not what it's saying. What it's trying to say, and how it was explained to me the best way, is that there's an invisible backpack, and that backpack has benefits. And those benefits allow where it's like the head start. So it's like a head start or an invisible backpack full of those types of benefits. It's not having to have your parents or you as a parent explain to your child when they're young about why that you're going to have this difficulty in life because people are going to treat you differently just because of the way you are, and trying to break down those conversations where more on an empathetic level as to having to go through this, whether it be your parents or whether it be a child, and having these types of conversations that they would probably normally not even consider or to even have. But it's not saying that. It's just saying, as far as understanding, again, it's that, I think, again, it's a head start or like that hall pass, or, you know, I'm trying to come up with different ways to explain and having, again, engaging that dialogue without having to be completely shut down or starting off on the wrong foot where it's instantly, again, being offended or offensive, or because of the fact that, you know, they're being told that it's incorrect, or it's just something that they, you know, quite frankly, just don't have the, you know, ability to even comprehend.
Well, if your first reaction, you know, to being confronted with these issues is to tell somebody to stop playing the victim card, or don't be defensive. I mean, here's what we know, whether it's in the context of Me Too or any of these other things, there's not ever been a victim that's been helped by somebody saying, just ignore that over there, just pretend it didn't happen, right? You've got to acknowledge the humanity in someone and their experience. You have to acknowledge that they are bringing a real authentic experience to the table and hear them out for what that is. I mean, that is such a basic part of it, to pay them that level of respect. Because if you're not, you're either one, failing to hear them, or worst case, you're victimizing them all over again. And you know, people that have an issue with the word privilege, okay, I hear you,
Yeah.
but I don't
Mhm.
want you to feel guilty. I want you
Yeah.
to do better.
Yeah.
Just let's understand each other
Empathetic.
and let's do better. Because you feeling some kind of way about it, you know, that doesn't help make things better. I want you to have an awareness and want to do better.
And
Right.
I would also say one thing that we hear all the time is that about people need to be educated. They need to be educated about some of the things that we go through, some of the microaggressions, understanding like why these things are. You shouldn't say these things towards people of color. But I mean, you can do all the education, but if you don't have a true heart change, it is not going to really help anything. So I think that's something that people have to do a lot of soul searching, a lot of meditation, because at the end of the day, without a heart change, you're still going to continue to act the way that you are. So, you can be educated, but if you don't have a heart change, then the education is basically thrown out the window.
Yeah, it's that empathetic. You really and truly have to have, you may not understand it, but you have, be empathetic. And if you don't have the ability, or if you don't have, even the means to do so, that's how I gauge where I'm not going to engage in this conversation, or my energy too as well. And that's how I pick and choose of whether or not that I, decide to engage in this conversation further, or to engage with this person any further. I would rather spend my time and energy now, again, with my community again, and being with this network and trying to build the network. And I want to also say, for again, with for non-minorities, this is where in some cases where, if in attempting to ask these questions, it's that exhaustion that we talked about. It's just feeling exhaustion. I even said, feeling tired and feeling exhausted. Again, it's that energy and trying to have your energy and trying to support your community, is to have the mentoring like we had mentioned, versus this energy of trying to educate, re-educate, in choosing where that energy, and then also it's pulled back and forth too as well, where you have to split your time between supporting your community and also trying to engage in for other folks too as well, and trying to engage with them and to answer their questions, in that aspect. To me, that's where, for me, a lot of times it becomes very, very exhausting.
Yeah, and there's only so much education that we can do. That doesn't mean that people are going to change. And you know, like Dan mentioned at the beginning, you know, we've been pulled, especially since last year, we've been pulled in so many different areas and these panels and these different conversations, and it's tiresome.
Yeah.
It's exhausting, like you mentioned, Brenda, and only so much we can do. So for me personally, my thing is, for me, I'm just trying to better myself, you know, take care of me as it relates to my mental health, because I can't make anybody change. I can't make anybody do anything. You know, there's only so much education that I personally can do to, you know, help change the situation. So, you know, we've been going through this in America, as Black people specifically, you know, for centuries upon centuries. And I mean, a lot of it is not changing. And I don't know if we will ever get to a point where it's 100% eradicated, and I don't think we will. But you know, we can do our part, but I don't think that we as Black people should like have that burden placed on our backs, that we have an obligation to educate as much as we are doing. I'm not saying that we don't do it at all, but I think we need to, you know, set some time to educate. We have time for educate. We have time for, you know, self-care, you know, enhancing our own personal mental health and just moving forward that way.
Yeah, there's a couple of stories I want to share. You know, one's from history, and one's a gentle and rather remarkable person that I got to meet. So, you know, one, and this was not a rare thing. This thing happened with schools. It happened with pools. I heard this story the other day about Montgomery, Alabama. So in Montgomery, Alabama, in the 30s and 40s, they had a network of these pools within the city, you know, that they would go, and they were you know, they were all white, right? Pools that everybody would go, and they would swim, and when they had to desegregate those pools in the 1950s, rather than do that, they closed them all. They closed them, they paved over them. There was no park system at all in Montgomery, Alabama for 3 years, just because they were forced to desegregate those things. So that's, you know, kind of one extreme and entirely exclusionary. Stay out. Your presence is not welcome. Your presence is so unwelcome that if we have to share in any way, we'd rather not have a thing than include you on it. I mean, that is the full opposite of inclusion. But then I'm reminded of a story about extending the care and understanding. I got asked to be on this group with the Holocaust Museum that's here in the Holocaust Center that's here in Maitland, right? And they were going to do an exhibit around the collection of some Klan paraphernalia that this gentleman named Daryl Davis had collected. Now, I don't know if you are familiar with Daryl's story. Daryl's an R&B musician, African-American man, 6 foot something or other. I've had the opportunity to meet Daryl on a couple occasions. He was so fully convinced that, you know, he could extend the olive branch and meet people where they were. Daryl started going to Klan meetings, you know, and he would, you know, invited, and it's a whole story of him and how he met the first white supremacist that he got tied up with. But Daryl, you know, reached out that olive branch. He endured the insults and everything to build dialogue. And over his, you know, lifetime, he's seen a number of people that have said and left that lifestyle and left being a white supremacist because of their dialogue with Daryl. And I told, you know, when I met Daryl, I said, you know, Daryl, you're a good man. I said, I'm not ready to be a Daryl Davis in my life. For maybe I'm you know, this stage of my life, I'm I'm over it, right? But that sort of dialogue and that level of people coming around, it gives me hope, that people even in the worst place can find and recognize some humanity in relationship. And like another story I heard earlier, just like invite people to dinner. My good, just invite somebody to your house for dinner that's different from you, and there's the beginning of something right there. So that's a way that we can start to recognize that humanity on a one-on-one basis.
Well, Dan, you touched on something about, again, the calling. Again, not everyone is again, and it takes time, it takes years to figure out, again, with that alienation and trying to turn it into something positive, a trailblazer in my case. I discovered for me, it's a trailblazer. It doesn't necessarily mean for me to with visuals and with protest. It's a matter of trying to figure out how you can participate. For me, it's these one-on-one discussions. For me, it's trying to attempt with these types of dialogue. Not everybody is called, not everyone is meant to be in those types of roles. You have to get to the place of trying to figure out, what that is and becoming comfortable with it, not only within the community, but also as a whole too as well. I think for me, that was my journey, being, not only Black, not only Caribbean, but also Southern too as well. And trying to find, again, where presence is just not enough, and trying to figure out, okay, as my role as a trailblazer, how do I want to go about this? How do I go about this? And becoming a bit more comfortable and trying to figure out how I can participate, how I can make a difference, how my role as a Black planner. So it takes some time. Again, it's for me, it was soul searching. A lot of it, it's just, opportunities that I've had. But I think that's a lot of questions for both Black professionals and for non-whites too as well, is trying to find out your roles. But first, again, part of this panel is, again, to engage that dialogue, and you can trying to approach it in different ways. But for me, that was my discovery in trying to tackle that negative tokenism and to portray it now as a positive trailblazer.
That's great. I think that's probably as good a place as any to start to wrap up. But that, I've really enjoyed the opportunity to participate and to talk to you guys about these issues. It's an endless pool of topics to discuss, and hopefully this is continues dialogue and encourages more dialogue amongst not just individual people, but also the organizations as well.
Yes, indeed. And we want to stress on the chat that there are resources there from both AIA and also for APA, and also just be on the lookout for different opportunities that may arise regarding this.
Great.
So with that being said, again, we thank you and we appreciate your interest, and have a wonderful, wonderful day and a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Take care.